PowerPlayChess, brought to you in association with Kagi. Round 3 of Norway chess, and I want to look at the game, the classical game, between Ramesh Babu Praggnanandhaa and Magnus Carlsen. World number 1, Magnus Carlsen. So Pragg, 18 years old, absolute superstar. He's edging towards the top 10 in the world. Played in the candidates not so long ago. Made 7 points, 50%. Not quite as good as Gukesh. Sharp player, an uncompromising player. And I'm sure he would have been delighted to see Carlsen play an open Sicilian. Carlsen playing the Khan variation of the Sicilian. Well, this is very flexible. You might play your pawn to d6, sometimes even to d5. You might advance with b5. It's not quite clear where you're going to play your pieces with black. But it does allow white to set up very aggressively. Bishop d3. That's certainly the most testing move for black. Queen e7. It's interesting, Queen c7. Carlsen has dabbled with the Khan over the years. And had some reverses, but also some great successes. But it's a risky one. Let's see. Queen e2. This line has a very good reputation for white. It's quite a flexible move in the sense that you might still go for a Marozzi bind with c4, but you might, in some circumstances, just play a very quick attack with f4 and e5. Depends how black sets up. d6. Okay, so Carlsen is going for a solid setup. Possibly with knight c6, bishop d7, knight c6, possibly with knight d7, going for a hedgehog. c4 from Pragg. So he's getting this big Marozzi binding. Knight d7 and then knight c3. And of course, black can play with bishop e7 and castles, b6 and bishop b7. But white can get to attack very, very quickly with f4, bishop d2, and moving the rook to e1 and attempting to press forward with e5 really quickly. With the bishop on d3, this is very, very dangerous for black. So Carlsen plays knight e5. Very interesting. He's looking to swipe that bishop. And Pragg thought for a long time here. It says 17 minutes. Here. If you go f4 here, there is a slight problem. I mean, this is basically the move you want to make. You want to press forward. But then queen b6, it's a pin, and if bishop e3, knight g4, it's not so clear. So Pragg played h3, so it's a bit of a compromise. As many of you know, I often criticise these little pawn moves at the side of the board. But very often this move is annoying. So that's why h3 was played. Now Carlsen went with b6. Now this is a really uncompromising move. Puts his bishop to the long diagonal. That's where it wants to go. But you could just play bishop e7 and castles. You could leave your bishop here. I'll show you the problem with b6. f4, so now Pragg can plough on. Yes. He's given up that beautiful light square bishop. However, it's a very straightforward way of playing, particularly with this bishop on b7. Here's the problem. If you leave your bishop on c8, then it still protects that pawn on e6. But now there is serious pressure. This is so often the key point in the Sicilian. If black takes here, then that gives white this fantastic square for the knight and potentially knight d5 later as well. If the pawn advances to e5, the knight drops back and white has such a good clamp here. The bishop will come to g5, the knight will come to e3, and black has very little counterplay. This is the problem. It's not like a Kalashnikov. Black doesn't get the counterplay in this line. So Carlsen played queen d7 to protect e6 and e6 still guards these squares. And there's some fun stuff that white can play here. I mean, you can try this and bishop h6. I mean, this is crazy stuff. If this is taken, rook f6, I mean, this looks fantastic. Black hangs on with queen f7. There's still some very interesting stuff there. But Pragg plays in a very straightforward way. Bishop g5, it's just a good move. Threatening to damage the pawns. Bishop e7, rook d1. Simple chess. Rook in the middle. And there are terrible threats on the d file. And watch this. This is good fun. If h6, white takes and goes e5, opening up the queen's path to g6. I mean, this looks awful already. Awful for black. Awesome for white. Awful for black. So what does black play? What about castles? You've got to get your king out. Then queen g3. And again, there are nasty threats with e5, opening up the d file. There's also bishop h6. This is really bad for black. Carlsen played rook c8. He's looking for counterplay. Queen e2. Simple stuff. Pragg is looking to play this move e5, cracking open the d file, exploiting this pin. So e5 played by Carlsen. I think he has to do this. But now that the structure is fixed, this makes life very nice for white. This knight is spinning round into this wonderful d5 square, and it's very hard for black to find counterplay. Well, that's what Carlsen is trying to do with queen c6. So if b3, then b5, and that exploits the pin. But of course, white doesn't need to play that. Knight e3 protects the pawn and looking to come in here. Bishop g5. And this was a very interesting moment in the game. Pragg could have plunged the knight into d5. That's where the knight belongs. Giving up a pawn and then playing queen g4 and just going for the attack. You know, there's lots of things threatened here. Bishop f6 kind of hangs on for black. If knight takes, there's a check. But, you know, maybe you just king h2. I mean, white has fantastic compensation here. It's very interesting. Pragg just put the brakes on for a moment and put the king on h1, just avoiding any checks here. But that gave Carlsen the chance to bite back, or just to fight back actually. It's not so much of a bite, but he's managed to get rid of that dangerous knight. And then he played f6 to stop that pawn advancing. And it looks like black has found his feet here. Carlsen's found his feet. But Pragg plugged on. Okay, he just protected the pawn on c4. But then b5. Seems like black is getting back into it. Knight d5 anyway. Queen c5. Carlsen would very much like to exchange queens here and then get rid of this knight. Queen f3. So threatens a check on h5. Of course, castling is out of the question. There's a big check on e7. I mean, that's the move you want to make. Carlsen took on c4. So a check. That displaces the king. And now, really nice move from Pragg. Rook f3. So the rook might swing up. Well, it might swing across to g3. It also has possibilities to swing across the board as well. So, for example, if pawn takes pawn, then rook c3. And let's say queen f2. You can take, and then simply pawn takes pawn. Look at that rook stuck in the corner. And it's not going to be too long before this rook is able to break in. I mean, this is already crushing. King is looking really bad. So Carlsen got rid of that knight. Very understandable decision. And queen b6. Pragg played very simply. He just took the pawn on c4. And that allows the rook to swing across to b3. So rook takes c4. Rook b3. So Carlsen is a pawn up with black. But the king is not looking good. So for example, if queen c7, well, just take it easy. There could be some threats down here. So just king h2. Just keep the king safe. And then it'll be white's turn on the other side of the board. And something similar to that happens in the game. Rook b4. So Carlsen desperate to exchange pieces. Very cool move here from Pragg. In a sense, this rook is just on the wrong square. It's been blocked out on the d file if it's not breaking through. Simple move. Rook d3. Very clever. So just supporting its brother here. After rook b3, so the next rook takes its place. Now, your turn with white. White to play. You've got Carlsen in a bit of a jam. The rook is stuck in the corner. How do you exploit that? There's no immediate breakthrough. So what do you play here with white? Okay, you have a think, I'll have a drink. Cheers. Are you ready? Queen d1. What a great switch. The rook needs a little bit of help if it's going to invade. So the queen comes back. It might come to b1 to support the rook. It might come to d5 to support the rook like this. Or indeed break through on its own. This is a wonderful move, queen d1. For example, if h6, hoping to shuffle around here, queen d5. No time. And crucially, at the other end of the board, in fact, the king can escape. Rook g3 is possible, but actually this is safe enough. The king escapes the checks, and then it's white's turn at the other end of the board with some very nasty moves coming. So queen d1, g6 played by Carlsen. Queen b1. And this rook is coming in. It's really nasty. So the threat is to check king g7 and then rook b7. So Carlsen moved the queen up. Now, there's no need to check straight away. In fact, if the rook checks here, yep, wins the rook here, but watch this. Check. And this time, that is perpetual check. The king will not escape. So Pragg played it very coolly. Rook b7. Just keep the king on the back rank. Beautiful. And the queen still protects the king. G takes f5. And again, your turn. White to play and win. How does white win? Pragg had enough time here to think things through. King h2. Beautiful. Before he swoops in with the major pieces, he makes sure that there's no queen bouncing down to give perpetual. And there is absolutely no defense here. Very coolly played. Rook g8. Okay, watch out for check. Check. And the king hides in the corner, but there's no need for that. Queen b3. Threatening mate. d5. Now you could check in this case, because king g7 allows queen here. And in fact, after this wins the rook. That's one way to win. But Pragg very quickly just took on h7. Very cool. Keeping the king shut on the back rank. Queen b8 and mate in a couple. Threatened. And here Carlsen resigned. If queen d6 to guard b8, just queen b7. Absolutely deadly. Threatening mate here. And there is just no way out for black. Let me try one move. Let me try this move. Queen e6 to guard this one. And if, well, I mean, white can choose how he wants to win, but let's go queen b4, check. Here, and then switch back. Queen b8 and mate next move. Wow, what a game from Praggnanandhaa. I mean, he played that so coolly. I thought what was very interesting was that in this position, when he had this opportunity to play knight d5 and get very good compensation for the pawn, he just played it more coolly with king h1. A couple of moves later, it looked like Carlsen was back in the game. But he wasn't phased and played some absolutely breathtaking moves here. The pick of them, I think, is that move queen d1. But king h2 finishing off at the end was also pretty good. Well, that blows things open in the tournament. By the way, Caruana won his classical game against Ding. Ding, very sadly, just overlooked a huge move. Was under a lot of pressure, but I'm pleased for Fabiano. So the whole tournament is wide open. Thanks for watching.